You are live. Hello to everybody who is here. You might want to chime in and let me know that you are in fact here. Can you hear audio and can you see video? Because that is the main thing. Any suggestions about that? Okay, we will start. I'm going to start with something that I am going to read from this book right here, which is an excellent book called Extreme Metaphors, Interviews with J.G. Ballard. Now, if you guys don't know J.G. Ballard is, you need to read his short stories, his novels, etc. He's most famous for probably writing the novel Crash, which was made into the famous David Cronenberg film. He also wrote a book called High Rise, which was, I think, made into a not as good film by Ben Wheatley. Anyway, this is a whole book of nothing but interviews. And at the end, I'll bring this back up with another Ballard recommendation for my book of the week, which I think you guys will like. So these interviews start in, I think, 1968. Just going to read one question. The interviewer asks, this is in 1970. Your books and your pronouncements about science fiction, and parenthetically, the apocalyptic literature of the 20th century and outer space as the symbol of inner space are miles away from the conventional science fiction. Do you consider yourself a science fiction writer? Ballard answers, not in the tradition of Isaac Asimov, Ray Bradbury, or even H.G. Wells, but I believe that science fiction is far more than the kind of popular space fiction that had its heyday between 1930 and 1960 and is now pretty well dead. American Magazine Sci-Fi, Arthur C. Clarke, and Heinlein, and so on. That's finished. Damn it, we're living in the year 1970. The science fiction is out there, and one doesn't have to write it anymore. One is living science fiction. All of our lives are being invaded by science, technology, and their applications. So I believe the only important fiction being written now is science fiction. This is the literature of the 20th century. I'm convinced that, say, in 50 years' time now, literary historians looking back, if they bother, which they may not, will say, you can forget about the social novel, you can forget about everything except sci-fi. Even bad sci-fi is better than the best conventional fiction. A ton of Proust isn't worth an ounce of Ray Bradbury. It's 100 years since Verne wrote his Voyage to the Moon. I think it was published in 1870 or thereabouts, and they landed on the moon almost 100 years later to the day. And this is the only literature that matters a damn. Everyone should be forced to read it all the time. It's true. So I'm going to leave Ballard there for now. Yeah, it's like all of this stuff that was written about computers taking over all kinds of stuff in the past. And now we are basically at that state with AI or whatever. So anyway, hey, John, good to see you. And thanks for returning to the Patreon channel. I barely noticed your absence. So we've got a science fiction moment where it's like you weren't really gone. I don't really know. So right now I'm in an experimental subscriber only mode just to see what happens like that. So maybe you're the only subscriber who's tuning in or able to be interactive, in which case that'll be great. Hi, Anthony Collins. Thanks for jumping in. And yeah, Ballard is up there in sci-fi and it's extremely prescient, his writing. And I will have a Ballard book to recommend at the very end. So he kind of ties in nicely to our theme of 1920s movies. Hello, Dano from the Jersey Channel Islands. Never visited those, but always had an ideation to want to do that. Incidentally, I think, didn't the Germans actually invade some of the Channel Islands during World War II? Maybe you can clear me up on that. So anyway, yeah, the Ballard thing ties in nicely to the films of the 1920s, which of course was more or less the first decade when we could see big versions of science fiction movies that cost was no obstacle to. The German companies, the USA companies were starting to make science fiction movies. And so what I'm going to do is I've got a list again here. And once again, I was thinking, oh, there's not going to be that many 1920s movies, but look what I've got here. So basically, I started with the films that I actually own, and then that list got expanded out a little bit. Yes, Dano says, yes, you were occupied during World War II, and you still have bunkers. Amazing. I'm wondering if anybody there kept practicing German just in case during that whole time. Side joke about World War II, which is not really that humorous, unless, of course, the Faulty Towers episode about the Germans is one of your favorite things, which I don't even know if that can be shown anymore, but it is actually hilarious. So, okay, I guess I've got a couple of movies that are actually in the 1910s. So I'm going to fold those in just to start out with. And the first one is D.W. Griffith's masterpiece, Intolerance. The thing I like about these movies that's about 100 years old is there's no sort of reticence about just putting the word masterpiece on the front. I mean, there's no arguing that. They're just like, this is what it is. So I'll just read the short thing on the background for those of you who are not familiar with Intolerance. You guys need to absolutely check this out. 1915 is when Intolerance by D.W. Griffith was made. The first quote on the back is, among the most influential films in screen history, says the American Film Institute. The short blurb on the back says, in this cinematic milestone, director D.W. Griffith utilized enormous sets and thousands of extras in order to stage his cinematic exploration of intolerance and its terrible effects throughout history, from ancient Babylon and biblical Judea to medieval Paris and even modern America. So the scope of this film is massive. And if you look carefully, you can see the kind of things that were happening. Yes, he was actually recreating ancient Babylon on a backlot in Hollywood. This is the version to get. This is a Blu-ray version. You can probably see these online for free if you go to archive.org, possibly right here on YouTube. So once again, I recommend this. And of course, D.W. Griffith would become notorious for the next following movie, which he did the year afterwards, 1916, which of course is the infamous Birth of a Nation. Now, this movie is filled with offensive material because now we are 100 years later or more looking back at it, but it's basically a Civil War pastiche about how a certain organization came into being, more or less, as a kind of policing factor against renegade elements during the Civil War. Now, I'm not going to mention exactly who that renegade outfit was, but I'll just read a little bit of the back here. Birth of a Nation, 1915, is writer, producer, directors D.W. Griffith's groundbreaking silent epic, a work of egregious racism. It was originally titled The Klansman. That's the book that it comes from, which is certainly significant. That also tragically was perhaps the most original and influential work of art produced by the still nascent movie industry. It has been both called savage and the most influential film in history now, via the splendid preservation reconstruction from Patrick Stanbury and Kenneth Brownlow, more of whom we will hear later. The latter of whom has declared that we can never censor the past. Modern audiences can see and judge for themselves. Now, this is a whopper of a movie, just like Intolerance is. I think they're basically getting up towards 3 hours long, but they are worth looking at, absolutely, because there's amazing stuff in there. Of course, we can now judge from the viewpoint that we are at. However, this does belong to a very specific era that should be kept in mind while viewing it, but it doesn't stop it from having absolutely amazing cinematography, close-ups, which were never even considered before Griffith started to do them. I think we've got
Few comments about it.
Oh, okay. Garrett says, didn't D.W. Griffith do a movie complaining about him getting canceled after Birth of a Nation? I'm not sure. I think there might have been possibly a kind of what did they used to call him, a mea culpa, perhaps, when finally there was enough distance from it and Griffith was still alive. I believe you are correct in that. I haven't actually watched that, but this is a complex set of circumstances that we can't really go into at this point. There's plenty of literature out there about it. And I think actually there's a PDF of the original program that came out when the movie was first being shown as a road show. And I downloaded that. I think maybe it's from archive.org, but they printed like a 30 or 40 page program to go with the film that they handed out to you when you went to see it. And I do have that. I meant to take a look at it and didn't quite manage to do it before this live stream, but definitely go and look for Birth of a Nation PDF program. And it's out there. And other films did this kind of like as an interesting way to kind of make a road show a little more special. I think it was done up into the 50s where they would hand out programs to roadshow movies, roadshow presentations, I think they called them. Movies like even The Sound of Music, I think, did that in the 60s, maybe Lawrence of Arabia. And I actually remember I think 78, maybe it was 78 when Apocalypse Now came out. And I remember going to see the first showing of Apocalypse Now at the Cinerama Dome in LA, big famous Cinerama film theater, originally built for big roadshow pictures. And I went to see that with Lori Black when we lived in LA, when we were kind of incensed, going, this movie costs $5 to go and see. This is ridiculous. And of course, we went there and they'd printed a program for Apocalypse Now. So that was a really cool version of Apocalypse Now to see. It was the version that had no titles in the beginning of it, just open with a black screen and jungle noises. But I had the program of it for quite a long time and then I tossed it, but it's probably out there also.
He founded United Artists.
Oh, Griffith founded United Artists. Yeah, that's right. Wasn't it? like Griffith, Chaplin, maybe, I think maybe there was a female actress involved in that also, possibly Lillian Gish, maybe Keaton, I'm not sure. Anyway, it was a bunch of badasses back in the day, certainly. Okay, moving forward out of Griffith land to 1920, we're actually the very first year of the 20s, and it starts out with a whopper, which is Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And this is a Blu-ray version. It's a restored version. This is the version to get. It's awesome. And of course has incredible stuff in it. It's got all those expressionist sets. Once again, you can see this at archive.org or probably right here on YouTube. Garrett says Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. Okay, so that makes sense. I mean, you've got these massive talents, literally united artists. They were artists, and united artists kept going for a really, really long time. And I think even there's probably still plenty of films out there that have a United Artists logo in the front of them that you have to go through, because I think it was just part of the agreements for being able to buy the company, which is a cool thing. So Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, of course, is about a kind of German showman, magician, huckster, who's got a guy who he turns into a somnambulist and has him go out and do various mischief all over the place. Let me read you the back of this a little bit. In 1920, one brilliant movie jolted the post-war masses and catapulted the German movement known as German Expressionism into film history. That movie was The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, a plunge into the mind of insanity that severs all ties with the rational world. So that's definitely something worth looking at. The cover is great. I believe it's original movie art from the time. So you can see what kind of a vibe they're pushing out there with this one. Next one is going to be a film from 1920 also, and it's called The Penalty. And this is going to be the first of our films with Lon Chaney Sr. in it. And I'll read you a little bit of the synopsis in the back, which is crazy. All these Chaney movies have really wild, improbable stories. A lot of them came from stage plays at the time, but I think a lot of these should be remade also, because they're just so preposterous and insane that it would be just great to see new versions of these. So the back synopsis for The Penalty says, in a role that established him as one of the most dynamically horrifying performers of the silent screen, The Penalty stars Lon Chaney as Blizzard, a criminal mastermind who orchestrates a bizarre and heinous vengeance upon the doctor who unnecessarily amputated his legs. So that's where the movie starts from. It's basically a standard revenge tale. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. On the back, you can see a little photo of Lon Chaney on his knees in costume. And yes, he actually did that. There was no green screen. And Chaney would do a few roles with amputees and misfits, people with deformities coming up, but this one is a great one. And you can see him basically grabbing some woman by the hair. He's got his crutches, he's on his knees there, or his half legs. So this one's definitely worth checking out too. And this is, as they say, this kind of established Chaney immediately people took a look at this and just went, uh, as you would in a movie right now also. Yeah, let's see. Jennifer has kindly pulled up a photo of Lon Chaney in character. So you can take a look at that. And that's what he was getting into to do this. And it's a great film. I mean, he's,
But they like that.
yes, he was absolutely the master of disguise. Sean Usanto says the penalty might be my favorite of them all. It's a good one. I feel like there should be some kind of a, the Alamo Draft House should do things like where they do Cheney marathons and show like 15 of them in a row, because they're all pretty short, like 18 minutes or something like that. Or maybe I should get in touch with the Alamo myself and go, interested in me curating a Lon Chaney Senior thing. This is the kind of thing they should be doing, or complete original Planet of the Apes movies, stuff like that. Walton Goggins would be perfect as Lon Senior in a serious biopic. Yeah, I think we mentioned that last time, actually. So let's move on to, okay, the next one I don't actually own, which is the John Barrymore version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, this is a film that really needs watching just for the transformation sequences. Of course, John Barrymore came from a hugely famous acting family, theatrical acting family, which goes all the way down to Drew Barrymore of the current day, whose house I found myself at one day with Buzz, which is another story entirely. But anyway, Barrymore was kind of known for this incredible profile that he had. And I think he was even called the Great Profile. But this version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, in the original transformation sequence, he does the whole thing himself without makeup and makes the most incredible faces and gesticulating that you've ever seen a film actor do. I think I even remember reading somewhere that Nicolas Cage thought this was one of the most amazing things that was ever captured on film, was this Barrymore transformation scene. In the towards the future transformations, as the evil actually becomes more impressed upon his physical being, they do get into some pretty seriously frightening makeup in some of his last transformations. And I remember the first time I saw those in my 20s, I kind of had nightmarish states about them. I couldn't get the view of Barrymore in those final makeup stages out of my mind. He's got kind of a cone head like they used to do, like the Incas used to do. Basically, the Incan royalty would wrap the heads of infants, so they kind of came out with conish heads. So anyway, the Barrymore Dr. Hyde has a conish head at the end, and I'm kind of at a loss for words for it because it's so frightening. So you guys need to take a look at the silent Barrymore, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Incidentally, since these movies are all silent and are in the public domain, okay, Jennifer has brought up a version of one of the final transformations. So there that lovely creature is. So that's an early sign of makeup. I think maybe Del Toro possibly could get after this, or Thomas Anderson, somebody like that.
Okay.
So we'll take a little break and you guys ask me what your favorites are. I'm going to have to get quickly into this list because the list is long. So what do you guys think about this stuff? What are yours? You've mentioned a few of them. So let's see. Greetings to Don Joe Fonzarelli and Felix. What do you guys think? What are some of your favorites? Old Dark House is a classic. However, that is in the 30s. So, okay, maybe it's just you guys here. So, incidentally, if you want to become a subscriber, I think there's a 5-minute lag between subscribing and being able to comment. So, that's what's happening with that. John says Body and Soul, 1925. Haven't seen that one, but I have, of course, seen the John Garfield one. Häxan, thanks, Zach. Häxan is actually on my list. So I will return to my list right now with Foolish Wives by Erich von Stroheim. Now, Erich von Stroheim is notorious for creating one of the longest films ever made, of course, which is Greed, a 10-hour film based on a book by Frank Norris called McTeague. And basically, well, I should talk about Foolish Wives first. I'll read you a little bit on the back about Foolish Wives. Artistically brilliant as it is gleefully perverse, Foolish Wives is Erich von Stroheim's epic scale of an account of an American diplomat's wife who falls under the spell of a phony Russian count. With his trademark eye for visual metaphor and gritty detail, von Stroheim infuses the aristocratic splendor of Monte Carlo, rebuilt in all of its majesty on the Universal backlot, with an air of moral depravity. Now, this is actually true what they're saying about it's not the entire city of Monte Carlo, but he did rebuild the casino at Monte Carlo on the Universal backlot. He also insisted on using real caviar, real champagne, real diamonds, real jewelry, and real expensive costuming for everything that he did, which more or less almost bankrupted Universal Studios. So he wasn't popular with the studio brass, but after Foolish Wives, he insisted on making Greed in 1924. And the original version of Greed was, in fact, 10 hours long. And only a few people ever got to see it. And it immediately was pulled and then cut down to 5 hours, which I think he agreed with. Then it was cut down to 3 hours. And then finally, I think it was Louis B. Mayer said, I'm sick of this guy. I'm sick of this whole thing. Chop it down to 90 minutes, which is what happened. And I think that's all we have of it today. But the movie Greed, I think originally was 10 hours long because he insisted on filming every single page of the book, which is an amazing thing that probably nobody has done since for a very good reason. I think a lot of it took place within the mind. So however that happened, who knows how it happened? I don't even know. But the version of Greed that exists is still worth taking a look at. And it basically ends up in Death Valley with two guys handcuffed to each other, both having guns. So there's probably a remake of that needs to be made also, I would imagine.
Comments from Sean and
Let's take a look at some of your comments now. Body and Soul's a 1925 race film, produced, directed, distributed by Oscar Michaud and starring Paul Robeson. Okay, well, I'm going to have to take a look at that. Absolutely. Sean says, Die Nibelung, Siegfried, and Die Nibelung, Kriemhild's Revenge by Fritz Lang, the OG epic fantasy film. I agree with that, and I do have those films. I forgot to bring those ones down here, but yes, I do have those ones, and those are great. That version of Hyde is disturbing. Absolutely, it is. Sean says my fave version is Frederick March. Yes, the Frederick Marsh version is amazing. I think it has Ingrid Bergman in it also. There is also a Hammer horror film called Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, where Ralph Bates turns into a woman, namely Martine Beswick, who goes around murdering people. So if you guys haven't seen Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, that's a great one. And of course, Martine Beswick is no lady to sneeze at, for those of you who know about Martine Beswick. Zach says you had me at moral depravity. Yeah, I mean, these are, of course, are all pre-code movies also. Sean says Foolish Wives. Yes, that's a good one. Two Cheney's clown film, He Who Gets Slapped. Yeah, yep. Incidentally, Jennifer has kindly pulled up a still of Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde,
1971.
1971. So yeah, this is a great one. You guys need to check that out. Absolutely. Martine Beswick, star of, I think she's also has a fight scene with Raquel Welch in 1,000,000 Years BC, which is worth the price of admission. I also had a poster of Raquel Welch in 1,000,000 Years BC as a 12-year-old. So I recommend that as a poster. I'm not sure how it's going to work out for those of you who have wives at this point, but it's completely harmless. So next I've got Häxan, and of course that's the great Benjamin Christensen film from 1922, all about witch hunting, and is a moral tale, but it's an excellent, excellent movie. I recommend this version. Criterion did a Blu-ray remastered of it. This is the best version to get. It's got a number of soundtracks on it. I think actually Dylan Carlson's Earth did a live performance to a version of this, which makes me think of that also. Actually doing soundtracks to all of these films would be a cool thing. So next we're going to move on to Nosferatu, one of the most famous films of the 1920s. F.W. Murnau. For those of you who don't know this film, I'm kind of making an assumption all of you do. Of course, there was just a Robert Eggers remake of this, which was pretty good. I must confess, it strikes me as the weakest of the three, the other one being the Herzog film from the late 70s with the great Kinski and Isabella Gianni in it. Also, I think Bruno Gratz is in that film too. But for those of you who don't know about this, it's subtitled Symphony of Horror, mastered from the acclaimed 35mm restoration by the F.W. Murnau Stiftung, that is a film restoration place. This edition offers unprecedented clarity and historical faithfulness to the original release. And it's also got tinted scenes in it, which the original release had. So this is the one you want, guys. And of course, I mean, just it's so iconic. It's in film, it's beyond iconography at this point. It's like a Statue of Liberty or something crazy. So moving on next, well, there's like actually a bunch of Lon Chaney films that were in here. 1923 has Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is an amazing Chaney film. Unfortunately, it's one of those films that is so beat and has been so hammered that even if you get a Blu-ray of it, like a Cohen version of it or something like that, it's still just maybe it's one of those things that AI can get applied to once it gets good enough, because it is a hammered film. No pun intended. Of course, Chaney is incredible in it. That dates from 1923. And then in 1924, there's also a Chaney film called He Who Gets Slapped. Now, I don't own this film, but this film is an absolutely amazing film. I've watched it. It's on YouTube and it's also on archive.org.
May mentioned that movie.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. He Who Gets Slapped and Laugh, Clown, Laugh. Yeah. I'm going to get to both of those actually. He Who Gets Slapped is on this great collection of Chaney films that, so the Warner Archive collection is actually putting out older films. This is a DVD set, and I think there's like six films on here, and you also get two versions of The Unholy Three. You get a silent version and you get the talkie version, which was remade. I think Tod Browning remade both of these films. Let's see. I'm not sure about that. I think maybe Tod Browning just made the silent version. Anyway, on this collection, there is He Who Gets Slapped, Mockery, which is a Benjamin Christensen film. You get The Monster. You get two versions of The Unholy Three, and you get a film called Mr. Wu. So I'm just going to go through these films briefly as they're listed on the back, because that'll make it quick. Lon Chaney was the king of character actors, single-handedly created the role of horror star, which he did. This collection celebrates his career, showcasing his powers at their peak. One Man, 1,000 Faces, 6 classic films. In He Who Gets Slapped, Chaney stars alongside the great Norma Shearer and John Gilbert. In Mockery, in a striking performance, Chaney proves his talents were not confined to prosthetics and makeup. In The Monster, Chaney plays the monstrous Ziska, who gathers candidates for his eerie experiments by causing roadway accidents. In The Unholy Three, he plays a ventriloquist who teams with a strong man and a dwarf to embark on a life of crime. So these movies are completely insane. He Who Gets Slapped is quite incredible. He plays a scientist who lives with a sponsor, a man who's sponsoring his scientific investigations. The guy steals all of his work, takes credit for it. Chaney kind of loses his mind, starts laughing hysterically, has kind of an otherworldly connection, insight, thinking, yes, what I have to do is laugh, becomes a clown in a circus, and his shtick is getting slapped because he feels like getting slapped is like the highest point of humor. And he gets this notorious act that becomes incredibly popular as He Who Gets Slapped. And the visuals in this movie are just amazing. If you saw the little still that I had announcing this movies of the 20s thing, you can see a still from that movie. So I recommend that you guys check out He Who Gets Slapped because it's an amazing film. Okay, let's see comments.
Let's start with Dave.
The Man Who Laughs. Yes, that's one of my films that I have to talk about here. Sister Hyde is super underrated. Yes, it is. One last time, Don't Sleep on a Page of Madness. I'll have to check that out. Peter Jackson should restore those beat up films. Yeah, he should. Or somebody like Robert Harris, maybe, who's restored things like Vertigo and Lawrence of Arabia. Peter Jackson should restore those. Eggers Nosferatu, agreed. I was lukewarm on it. Yeah. Um, I mean, it's kind of a tall order. It's kind of like remaking Frankenstein or The Mummy or something, which of course, I think Del Toro's making a Frankenstein remake, so I'm interested in that one. Sean asks, Mark, did you know Streffen and David and Tim did a music thing called Hobgoblin? Wrote a new score to Nosferatu. No, I did not know. Incidentally, are you Sean from Sacrilege? Is that your last name? Only ever known you as Sean. But let me know if you are. And if you are, hey, Sean, it's been a spell. Browning did both versions. Okay, moving forward and still keeping in the. Oh, yeah, here's a still from Hugh gets slapped. So this is great. You know, this is really awesome stuff. And of course, Lon Chaney did all of his own makeup. So that's something to keep in the back of your head. This is before makeup artists existed, you know, all those type of people.
His teeth.
And yeah, of course he does. He's doing it for real. So once again, this is pro. Norma Shearer's grandson plays bass for Spinal Tap. Wow, I didn't realize that that was Harry Shearer was actually Norma Shearer's grandson. That's absolutely amazing. And I did actually get to meet uh, Harry Shearer once in passing, kind of weirdly. I was going to a club here in Austin to see a friend play, and I didn't realize it, but Harry Shearer had just played a set with somebody immediately before my friend's band had played. I walked up to him and I go, Harry Shearer, it's a pleasure to run into you by accident like this. And I said, oh, incidentally, um, thanks for the Derek Smalls insight. And he goes, oh, really? You know where Derek Smalls came from? And I go, yeah. I go, that's thick as a brick, correct? And he goes, you got it. And he said that I was one of the very few people that knew where Derek Smalls came from. So not to name drop or anything. So let's move along a little bit here. And next what we have is a Tod Browning package that Criterion was so kind to put out for me, because Freaks was one of the films that I'd been wishing to see restored and released, and was thinking maybe one day, maybe one day. So that this Tod Browning package from Criterion is worth purchasing immediately. And I'll just read you a couple of the synopsises from in here. So reading about, I'm going to read about the unknown. Of course, all the design is perfect for Criterion as usual. So since the unknown was in the was out in 1927, so we're skipping a little ahead for this, but what the synopsis for the unknown is in here is the most celebrated and exquisitely perverse of the many collaborations between Tod Browning and his legendary leading man, Lon Chaney. The unknown features a wrenchingly physical performance from the man of a thousand faces as the armless Spanish knife thrower Alonso. He flings daggers with his feet, whose dastardly infatuation with his beautiful assistant, Joan Crawford, a woman, it just so happens, who cannot bear to be touched by the hands of any man, drives him to unspeakable extremes. Okay, you know, I mean, that's, we want to see it, right? This is where you get to see it. So I'm all for the unspeakable extremes and stuff like that. Um, it's one of those things that's kind of left over from the um, writings of people like H.P. Lovecraft and people like that, because they never went into um, lurid, specific descriptions of stuff. They would just say, and we basically can't talk, you can only imagine what would have happened. And then if you have a brain like mine, you just imagine really bad things. Anyway, moving on.
Freaks. I don't know.
Well, Freaks is technically from the 1930s. So we're not talking about Freaks. Oh, there's another next Sunday. There's another film called The Mystic also, which is a Tod Browning shocker. So get this, check it out if you have. I think all this stuff is on Criterion Channel if you guys have that. So yes, the twist in the unknown is extremely, yeah, it's something. Moving on to 1926, we have another Murnau film, Faust. Now, this film is absolutely amazing. I'll read the synopsis on the back if you don't know. It's based on Faust by Goethe. Effectively, a man makes a deal with the devil, sells his soul in exchange for worldly wisdom, experiencing stuff that he hadn't experienced before. I think there's been some updates of it. One of my more favorite ones is Bedazzled, a British film which stars Peter Cook and Dudley Moore, which I suggest checking out. We get to the 60s, that'll be one of my favorite films in there. I'll just read the back of this. 1927, utilizing the full resources of the UFA studios, F.W. Murnau, who made Nosferatu and Sunrise, is another great Murnau film, orchestrated a colossal adaptation of Goethe's Faust that ranks alongside Fritz Lang's Metropolis as the greatest achievement of the German silent cinema. Gösta Ekman stars as the titular alchemist who, struggling with his faith amidst a devastating plague, is offered the power to cure and the gift of youth in exchange for his soul. As the diabolical Mephisto, Emil Jannings delivers a performance of operatic intensity by turns charming, comical, and horrific. So this is one you guys need to check out also. The sets, the costumes, everything in it, absolutely amazing. And like they say, it's a monumental film.
Could you talk about what you like about films from the 1920s, what makes it special, and maybe you could ask them what they like about it?
So Jennifer has asked me what I like about films from the 1920s and what is special about them. I think I just like the idea that they're basically in completely unknown territory. There's nothing that's been done on this scale before, and they're kind of making it up as they go along. The people running the companies don't know how to make films. So they're in the hands of directors and basically artists who are just going, we got this, here's what we're going to do. And more times than not, the brass at the companies would basically just go, okay, let's do it, because they had no idea and they had money to throw at it because movies were starting to make a lot of money and there was no precedence for this stuff. So it's all basically individuals' mindsets and individuals' visions. The artists, the directors, the cinematographers, the set designers, everybody who was working on these was doing this for the first time. So it's really interesting to me because it's a really, there's nothing been done like this before. So it's all brand new stuff. and they all just have a certain feeling to them that's kind of indefinable, really. I mean, it's really still an innocent time. Censorship doesn't really exist at this point. So there's nobody making movies by committee or trying to think what an audience is like, what an audience is going to like. They are just throwing stuff out there and they're doing it on a immensely huge scale.
The transition from silent movies to talkies.
Well, that didn't happen. I mean, we're going to get to the transitions from silence to talkies at the very end of the 20s is basically when it happens. So
Quality about those movies.
about what?
Start transitioning to talking movies.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. The transition to talkies is interesting because they're in a place where once again everything has to be remade. And so, for example, somebody like Lon Chaney, when you find, I think the only movie that he talks in is the talking version of The Unknown. And his voice, he's got kind of a high voice. And so after seeing all the stuff that he's made and hearing him with kind of a high voice, it's a little weird. And you can hear how, okay, this isn't actually matching up. And that was unfortunate. Everybody had these ideas about what he sounded like. And there was a few people who sound didn't work out for. I think John Gilbert was one of those people too. He was kind of a heartthrob during the 20s. And once people heard his voice, it was like, okay, not too sure about that. Anyway, speaking of talkies, um, the very first real talkie was this movie here, The Jazz Singer by Al Jolson. Now, The Jazz Singer is problematic now for a variety of things. The biggest thing basically just being the blackface issue. I mean, let's just cut to the chase. That's it. That's really the only issue. And then there's a whole thing about basically the clash with his father over what could be sung and what not could be sung in the house because his father was a cantor and his father wanted him to be a cantor also, and Al Jolson wanted to be a jazz singer. And so you do get to hear some of Al Jolson's incredible talent as a singer and a whistler. There's a sequence in here where he does a nightclub act where he does a little whistling thing, and how Al Jolson whistles will make your brain explode. I mean, it's just, you've never heard whistling like this. And Al Jolson actually was a tremendous singer, and there is a chain of connections from Al Jolson directly to David Bowie as far as singing style. And what that is Al Jolson becoming one of the most famous recording artists of the time. And of course, that's why they said, we're going to make a talkie. There's going to be singing in it. Who can we get? It's basically, we got to get Al Jolson because he's the most famous singer of the time. So that's who they got. And one of the people who was incredibly influenced by Al Jolson was Bing Crosby, who also became a huge singer and crooner in the 1920s. Famously starting with Bix Beiderbecke's band, he went on to sing with Paul Whiteman. This is 20s jazz we're talking about now. I know a lot about this stuff, so I won't tangent off in it too hard. And then, of course, after Bing Crosby, one of his biggest influences, one of the people he influenced the most, of course, was Elvis Presley and directly David Bowie. So, and also Anthony Newley is in there as an influence who was also directly influenced by Al Jolson. and Bing Crosby. And so just on a very small tangent, Al Jolson was directly influential to me also because I started listening to Al Jolson. I listened to a lot of 20s jazz on Spotify and elsewhere. Al Jolson came up in my feed. I started listening to him, and his timing and his swing and his improvisational aspects started to kind of get in my brain, and I started really listening to what he was doing. And it's quite incredible the subtlety and the riffing that Al Jolson is doing. And one of his songs in particular, April Showers, I started listening to a lot. And there is a line in April Showers about a bluebird. So those of you who know my work know I have an album called The Bluebird. And Al Jolson was one of the influences for naming my record The Bluebird. Anyway, without getting into the myriad of stuff about minstrelsy, blackface, all that kind of stuff, it's a shame that that can't be spoken about without it being a hot button issue, because there are some incredible artists that were working within the genre of minstrelsy, namely Burt Williams and Emmett Miller. Those are just two men I'm going to mention, and you guys should go and listen to them. They're quite incredible artists, and their influence is long and continued for a really long time, all the way up to contemporary artists. And Emmett Miller, of course, directly influenced Jimmy Rogers and Hank Williams. So there's that whole country music thing there. And I'm going to leave it there and continue with silent films, because otherwise we'll be talking about that. And I don't want to have any buttons pushed. Yes, let's see. Let's go back a bit. Olga Baklanova was one of the few silent stars to successfully transition to films with sound. And of course, she's the famous trapeze artist in Freaks. Yes, she was. That's right. Twist in the Unknown is fucked up. Yes, it is. Passion of Joan of Arc is certainly the best film of the 1920s, the best of all time, says Arturo. Yes, I haven't gotten to that yet because that's in the latter part of the 20s, but I agree with you about Passion of Joan of Arc. Sean also says those early films were still literary minded in a lot of ways too. They were. And I think they stayed true to a lot of the material because they realized that a lot of people had read these books also. Um, they were free, as a lot of the writers were on the page. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how they figured out how to build those sets. Well, I mean, they were craftsmen, looking back on it now. I mean, our world was completely a handmade world. That was a handmade world. And it still is in some senses. I mean, when people are building houses, the plumbing and the electricity has to be put in there by people. We're not completely AI yet, but to think about the craftsmen of the past is something that's truly humbling. So moving right along, next we have Diary of a Lost Girl, Louise Brooks. And this is another Pabst film. He would go on to make Pandora's Box. And I'll just read the synopsis on the back of this, because this is a crazy film that's worth looking at. And of course, Louise Brooks is always worth looking at. Incredibly charismatic, interesting person, American actor who went to Germany to make movies in the 1920s. Can you think of a bigger, crazier adventure for an American girl to do back then? The second and final collaboration of actress Louise Brooks and Pabst, Diary of a Lost Girl, is a provocative adaptation of Marguerite Boehm's notorious novel in which the naive daughter of a middle-class pharmacist is seduced by her father's assistant only to be disowned and sent to a repressive home for wayward girls. She escapes, searches for her child, and ends up in a high-class brothel, only to turn the tables on the society which had abused her. I'll just leave it there. This is great, worth watching, amazing sets, amazing acting, the editing, the production quality, outrageously good. Once again, this is in the public domain, as all of these films are, and definitely Diary of a Lost Girl and Pandora's Box are absolutely essential viewing, just for the material. And really, this is the kind of stuff that they barely put into movies now. These kind of social constructs. Of course, movies now, need to be made by committee, more or less. So they're trying to keep a variety, they're trying to tick a variety of boxes, decide what's permissible, who's going to be offended or not. And it's kind of a sad thing, but I view it as a temporary thing in films now. And I'm hoping that films will get reset somehow, some way. So moving along to one of the possibly more famous movies of the 1920s that virtually everybody's heard of, I would imagine, and that is Metropolis by Fritz Lang. I've got this nice Blu-ray with this lenticular cover on it. And for those of you who don't know Metropolis, I can't assume that everybody knows about this. One of the most celebrated movies in cinema history. It is influenced Blade Runner, Star Wars, whatever. You can basically just go down the list. It's a massive amount of movies. Uh, this is kind of the definitive version to get this Kino. Kino does a great job with silent films. This one's says incorporating more than 25 minutes newly discovered footage. This 2010 restoration is the definitive version. It also has like a score from 1927 was created for the original version of it. And I don't have much to say about it other than it's a city of the future, which is run by workers that you never see, and they have a revolution. And this is a great metaphor for what we're in right now, also, actually, with all this AI stuff. So there was a really hideous version of this, I think, put out in the 1980s, where some genius at a movie company decided, let's put a bunch of 80s music to this, and then put it out. And I think maybe Giorgio Moroder was perhaps the producer of doing this. I'm not sure. I kind of blanked it out of my mind, like I do things like that. So anyway, moving right along, we are now going to be in the same year as Metropolis, and nobody's mentioned this movie yet. And this is probably it's up there in the top five. Maybe we can all come up with a top five at the end of this. But that movie is Napoleon, made by Abel Gance, a French filmmaker. And this movie came out in 1927. This movie is 5.5 hours long, and it only gets to the Battle of Austerlitz. So this whole thing was going to be an incredibly epic undertaking. Okay, so basically, there's like a trilogy. Everybody makes trilogies. We're making a trilogy of this, we're making a trilogy of that. Can't wait for part 3, whatever. This was Abel Gance was going to make 3 of these. So this basically starts from when Napoleon is born and goes to Battle of Austerlitz when he's maybe 28 years old or something. And this movie is absolutely outrageous. And it's difficult to see live because it is 5.5 hours long. And he's basically Abel Gance, apart from this being an absolutely incredible film, he invented a thing, he pretty much invented cinerama with this film, because the end sequence of this film has 3 individual screens next to each other that are projected together, and it creates a cinerama type of viewpoint. And this is absolutely an incredible thing to see if you can. For a while, I think in the 80s, Francis Coppola funded a restoration of it, and his father, Carmine Coppola, who was a film composer, wrote some of the Godfather soundtracks and some other things, did a score for this. Coppola licensed it, and then it went around the United States on a roadshow version of it. I didn't get to see that version. Another composer, Carl Davis, who's done a lot of soundtracks for silent films. I think he did Intolerance and Birth of a Nation also. He wrote a score, and that score was licensed for a version that could only be shown in Europe. And Jennifer and I were lucky enough to be in Europe like 10 or 15 years ago now, something like that, 10 years ago now. And there was a showing of Napoleon with a live orchestra with Carl Davis conducting it in London at the Royal Festival Hall. And I saw it was playing, and I just said, we're going. And we went to it, and it was absolutely amazing. And when they, in the final part of it, when they had the 3-screen version, people were just going, oh, because this is the biggest movie you've ever seen. I mean, you can think of it as like 3 IMAXs next to each other with a live orchestra playing. So this version that I have here is a BFI version that was put out, I'm not sure when, but you have to have a region-free Blu-ray player to watch it, or if you have like maybe I think a PlayStation will play it, I think. But this is an outrageously good movie, and this is basically one of those movies like Greed or whatever. But try and see this one if you can. I think Coppola still owns the license to be able to show this one, the USA version of it. So fortunately, maybe Coppola is going to have to pass on till we can see a version of Napoleon here, unless he kind of decides, okay, I'm going to do that. So next we have in 1928, The Man Who Laughs. And this was mentioned earlier. And this is an outrageously good film also. This is also considered to be the source material for what would become the Joker in the Batman comic books. So I'll just read the synopsis very quickly on the back here, since we're getting over an hour at this point. This is based on a novel by Victor Hugo, of course, who wrote Les Miserables and the Count of Monte Cristo. Maybe the Count of Monte Cristo is Dumas, I think. But he wrote Les Miserables. This is an outrageously good film, too. Based on the novel by Victor Hugo, story centers on an extraordinary adventures of Gwynplaine, whose wide and mirthless grin inspired DC Comics legendary Batman villain, the Joker. Gwynplaine says, Gwynplaine is punished by the king for his father's transgressions by having his face carved into a hideous grin. Disfigured and alone, Gwynplaine rescues a blind girl named Dia, and both end up starring in a sideshow where they fall in love because she cannot see. Dia does not know about her lover's tormented grin. So that's this movie, and this movie needs to be watched also. Once again, incredible production value, makeup, acting, everything. And this is absolutely worth watching and getting. I mean, I own these films because I think one day you won't be able to watch them because they'll probably just all go away. And even in screening, I mean, these are not popular films, obviously, but I feel they're worth the investment just in case.
Comments?
Yes, let's see, new comments.
Go back a little bit
Okay. My producer will help me with the comments.
to like somebody mentions Piccadilly.
Piccadilly, I haven't seen that one. I know about it though. Is that a Browning film or is it a Murnau film?
Motorhead wrote a song about that movie. I'm not sure which might be Metropolis.
Oh, maybe about
I think that's what we're talking about.
I think he was mentioning like just Lon Chaney in general. Let's see, Sean says Napoleon is something else. It's so watchable. The runtime is scary, but it plays incredibly faster. That's true. I love the idea that he was going to make two more. It's one of those what if stories that lingers through film history. Incidentally, there's a great book by the film scholar Kenneth Brownlow that he wrote about Napoleon and the making of it. He's also written a great book about Sergio Leone, I think, which is also really good too. That's worth watching. Let's see. Victor Hugo spent time in the Channel Islands. Wow. Okay. That's believable. Owning movies is the way to go. It is, because you never know when it's all going to end up going to streaming land, and then streaming land goes away. Yeah. So, all right, we're actually getting to the end here, but we still have a few more absolute classics as far as I'm concerned. This has already been mentioned. Passion of Joan of Arc by Carl Theodor Dreyer. And yeah, this is I think this is probably one of the most amazing movies ever made, really. I mean, like some of the other ones are. You know, I mean, Metropolis, Faust, this one, Passion of Joan of Arc. If nobody's seen this, you need to watch this and prepare yourself, because this is just a next level filmmaking. And once again, this is something that would never, ever get made today. I mean, it's quite possible somebody with, you know, the balls and the pull and the undeniable gravitas, somebody who basically no film company can say no to, would be the only person that could make this. And yeah, this is a film that is a devastating film and absolutely invaluable, and is one of the greatest films ever made. So I would say this is in the top 5, absolutely. And we'll put that one there. West of Zanzibar. This is a Lon Chaney film. I'm just going to read the synopsis of this. And this is a Tod Browning film. So Tod Browning and Chaney in this thing is absolutely amazing. Revenge is a dish best served cold and director Tod Browning's lurid tale of love and vengeance, starring Lon Chaney, Lionel Barrymore, and Mary Nolan. When his dying wife returns with a baby a year after leaving him for Crane, the ivory trader who crippled him, a Limehouse magician named Froso vows to get even. Placing the baby in a Zanzibar brothel, Frozo spends the next 18 years living with cannibals while he waits for the child to come of age. Summoning the debauched young woman to his jungle lair, Frozo plans to unite the girl with her long-lost father, after which he will order the natives to kill the traitor and burn Crane's daughter alive. I mean, what? I don't have anything to say about it. I don't have one thing to say about that other than watch this because it's amazing. And Lon Chaney as the Limehouse magician Frozo, who loses his legs and is in a wheelchair. I mean, the stuff that he does is outrageous. I mean, it's just, this guy in any kind of an arm wrestling contest in reality with somebody, uh, Lon Chaney's amazing. And so,
He has the high voice.
no, he has the high voice in the remake of The Unholy Three. But just on a side note, there's a great Charles Bronson movie called Hard Times, and it's made in the 1970s. Bronson plays a bare knuckle fighter during the Depression, and his name is Chaney. So I'm wondering if that's just kind of a Lon Chaney tribute that both of them came up with during that movie. Incidentally, if you haven't seen Hard Times with Bronson, you need to watch that one because it's absolutely amazing. Okay, last movie of the 1920s is going to be Pandora's Box. Once again, F.W. Murnau with Louise Brooks, and that's what we're ending up with, and this is absolutely amazing. I'll read you the short synopsis of this. Sensationally modern, the film follows the downward spiral of the fiery, brash, yet innocent showgirl Lulu, whose sexual vivacity has a devastating effect on everyone she comes in contact with. How about that? This is great. Definitely one of the top fives of the 20s. So my top five is going to be Passion of Joan of Arc, He Who Gets Slapped, Napoleon, Pandora's Box, and The Man Who Laughs. Those are going to be my top five right there.
You went third one.
So you guys go ahead and drop your top five, and I will go blah, blah, blah about some other stuff. Or whoever's left. So once again, thanks you guys for being here. The subscriber thing was a little bit of an experiment. So we'll just leave that there. Maybe there'll be more. I won't do a subscriber one next week. But once again, subscribing costs no money, obviously. And I won't bother you too much through notifications all the time. Just a quick side note to the art drop. We don't have an art drop for this week, but once again, there's a reminder for some of the movies of the 21st century that we're talking about. This drawing of Jennifer's of a scene from No Country for Old Men is still available at her Etsy store. And You can also get a download of it, digital download of it, should you choose. Next week, we will do movies of the 20s and 30s. And well, next week we'll do the 30s, 1930s. And Jennifer will have an art drop for something from the 20s
Suggest what
and also something from the 30s. So if you guys have suggestions for what you would like Jennifer to draw a scene from, go ahead and send suggestions, because that would be cool, because obviously this girl can draw the hell out of anything. So that is that. And I'm just going to end with, I had a suggestion for the book of J.G. Ballard interviews, which are great. Obviously, Empire of the Sun, the Spielberg movie, that was about his childhood. But the Ballard book I'm going to recommend is this one, which is his complete short stories. And these are great because they range anywhere from 5 to 20 or 30 pages. Get this. He is a great writer, and I recommend J.G. Ballard. And then the music I'm going to recommend for this week is going to be by the French composer, French 20th century composer, Olivier Messiaen. And the piece that I'm recommending by him is called Turing Galila Symphony. And this is an amazing symphony. You guys should listen to it with headphones on. It's built for a gigantic orchestra. And this version that I have here is Andre Previn and the London Symphony Orchestra. So you know it's going to be amazing sounding. So there's a lot of movie recommendations for this week, so I'm not actually going to make one.
should you pick something to watch for next week?
Pick something to watch for next week. Let me think of a 30s movie. Let's see.
Or if they have suggestions?
Yeah, if you guys have suggestions, I mean, obviously the 30s are moving into all of the classic Universal horror films. There's Frankenstein, Dracula, Bride of Frankenstein, The Mummy with Boris Karloff, all those Karloff movies. You know what I might actually recommend for next week is, since we touched on it today, is Freaks. So for those of you who have not seen it or don't know about it, this is the one I'm recommending, is Freaks. And this is from I think 1932. And this is basically the movie that destroyed Tod Browning's career. He was one of the big money makers for Universal all through the 20s. And then Freaks was like a bridge too far for him. It's not a Lon Chaney movie, excuse me, but it's an awesome film. And so that's going to be my recommendation for it. I can't guarantee Jennifer will want to.
Freak?
Jennifer said she'll draw a freak. Okay, so there we go.
Two.
All right, a freak or two. All right, so that's where we are. Thanks for being here for movies from the 20s. There was a lot more than I thought. I'm going to sign off and say goodbye to you guys. And so Freaks is the movie to watch. And when I put up the post for the live stream announcement, I'll put that movie in there. And then if you guys want to check back on all this stuff, I guess I can put my big list in there with the live stream review that you guys can watch. So thanks a lot. And I'll see you guys later. Have a good week.